Good evening, everybody. Erev Tov. I'm Nama Kelman, the dean here at Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, and I want to welcome everybody to our Ayala Zalman Abramov Library, where we have book launches, book readings, poetry readings, so I couldn't think of a more appropriate place. As I said, for friends, family, and fans of Jo Milgram, who I think by now is a cultural phenomenon between her art, her midrash, her poetry, her writing. What's next, Jo? Dance? Music? We're waiting, because we know there will be a next and a next. So really, welcome and enjoy what I know will be a enriching, inspiring evening of poetry and song. And I will hand over the mic to my beloved Professor Alice Shalvi.
Thank you.
What a pair. What a dynamic duo. Whoa! Okay.
Well, I gather, I wasn't quite sure in advance, that the language this evening is English, right? So I won't even bother to make the usual opening statement saying that I'm going to speak in English, because I assume that there are some people here who don't know Hebrew. Yeah? Give you the credit that you all know Hebrew and that we're speaking English today because we're going to be honoring someone whose work has been primarily in English. I first met Jo many, many years ago. It must have been, well, not that many, over 20, but you know, who's counting? In San Francisco, where I was speaking on behalf of the New Israel Fund, and Jo, whom I'd not met previously, was to introduce me to the audience or make some kind of welcoming remarks. We met in an extraordinary house, the home of a lover of Japanese art. And there, in the center of the room, as I remember it, was a blossoming cherry tree. So I guess it must have been around this time of the year. Right? And before she started introducing me, Jo led us, or rather she taught us, the blessing over seeing the first blossoms, which is Shelo chasa ba'olamo klum ubarah bo briot tovot ve'ilanot tovot le'anot behem bnei adam. In other words, God, who has made nothing lacking in this world and has created in it goodly creatures and goodly trees to give humankind pleasure. Now, I'm telling this little anecdote because it seems to me so typical of Jo. Jo has this extraordinary ability to bring Judaism and practicing Judaism and the philosophy of Judaism and the feeling of Judaism and the experience of Judaism into everything she does, even though it may at first seem a most secular activity. But when you look more closely, you will see that she has this ability to lahagdi l'kadesh, to sanctify, which is so typical of Judaism because even the most trivial, ordinary, everyday acts we perform have an appropriate blessing. And by making that blessing, we precisely transform the ordinary into the holy, into the blessed, right? In everything. And that, I think, is something that is typical. I hope she agrees with me. But anyway, as we all know, critics sometimes see things in the creator's work which the creator was not aware of and might not consciously, usually not consciously, have put into the work, right? It's the workings of the subconscious, of the imagination, which are here. And some time ago, Joe produced at a meeting which we have on the 2 equinoxes of the year, the solstices rather, a group of friends, each of us a creator in some way or another, or would-be creator. Joe introduced us to a beautiful 18th century Hasidic saying, and I quote, "Just as the hand held before the eye can hide the tallest mountain, so the routine of everyday life can keep us from seeing the vast and the secret wonders that fill this world." Right? The hand before the eye, right? Blotting out the highest mountain. And I think it is Joe's capacity, right, to see everything, not to hold the hand before the eye, to block what is more than human, what is divine, what is beautiful, that makes her actually, in my mind, a magician, a transformer. I won't say a witch, though we all know there are good witches. No, I would prefer to call her a magician. She transforms the everyday, the cast-offs, into art. She goes around collecting odds and ends that other people have discarded because she sees in them the capacity to create something new. Right? And Joe's art is, on the one hand, serious, but it's also playful. It's full of wit, spirit, right? Humor, right? Visual puns, as those of you who know her midrash will remember, right? A humor that very often belies the essential seriousness of her message or vision, right? And these same qualities of transformation, of wit, appear also in those of her writings, which I already know, right? Whether they're prose or whether they're verse, whether they're her letters to her family, or whether it's the poetry that she's going to read to us, or talk about and read to us today, right? Some time ago, I think it must be already close to 2 years or so, Hebrew Union College hosted a fascinating evening about art as midrash, presenting both an exhibition of the marvelous Torah mantles, which she transformed into midrashic works, right? But also hosting at the same time an incredible symposium discussing this ability to transform one thing into another. In that case, the question was, can we take something which originally had sanctity and turn it into a work of art, which seems to be secular, right? Today, I think what we're going to experience is how, again, Joe takes the everyday and transforms it into something that transcends the everyday and that verges on what is sacred. So, Joe, up to you now.
It's a challenge to hear that, isn't it? Before I speak, it's like a eulogy. So,
well, it's always good to hear the eulogy before one dies.
Beforehand.
Right?
Right. Thank you for coming. I'm very honored and awed that you all came to hear and to read the poems with me. It's already a week past Pesach, but I'd like to read you something about where I was Seder night. Seder night with the Jahalim. I'm 88. I married before my 20th birthday. For the 62 years of my marriage, I was the Seder maker, adhering to the halachic trivia, which puts the observant Jewish woman back into the slavery of Egypt in order to experience, ironically, a freedom from slavery. There's a countdown of tasks, you all know this, to do, beginning weeks before Pesach, requiring the radical turnover in the kitchen from the leavened reality to the unleavened spiritual state. The replacement of dishes, cutlery, pots, the planning of the Seder feast for many guests, and all its myriad details. This is accompanied by growing anxiety and exhaustion as the great day approaches. More than any other factor, this exaggerated ritual has created the kosher resort industry, which invites the family that can afford it to leave the old leavened kitchen and flee to freedom before the mother's nervous collapse. This is so much a part of my DNA that even though I no longer subscribe to this ritual, my body tenses up, chomping at the bit when the month of Nisan rolls around. So how was this night different from all other nights? Initiated by my son Jeremy, for years actively concerned with human rights and especially with the welfare of the deprived Jahalin Bedouin, we brought refreshments and a mini text and went to the Jahalin encampment. We were 4, Jeremy and I, his daughter, my granddaughter Mayan, and Azezet, a sister in the Kamboni Catholic order, whose work includes assisting this community and who speaks Arabic. On the 15th of the lunar month, the sun sets as the moon simultaneously rises, providing the maximum light for centuries of celebrants, if the sky is clear. The Jahalin live near Ma'ale Adumim, on the way down to the Dead Sea. Barren hills accompanied our descent. The little green of spring is gone. Unfriendly Israel provides no easy highway access. You have to pass their village by kilometers, then U-turn and gingerly descend down an unpaved opening. They live in lean-tos made of scrap lumber, metal, and rags, vulnerable to all the treacheries of weather. Their only building is a remarkable schoolhouse built of mud and tires by an Italian nonprofit, which is constantly threatened for destruction by Israel. We were met by a group of 5, 3 daughters of Abu Hamis, the spokesman, who manages both Hebrew and English, and Ibrahim, his nephew. The younger girls were 11 and 13. The eldest, 20, was still single because her father keeps turning down potential unsuitable suitors. The mother of 7 remained in the kitchen. They brought a plastic table with 2 legs and supported it with a makeshift addition. The goats were being brought in from pasture. Meh. Talking about freedom seemed absurd. Jeremy spoke about blessing, and we recited Shechianu. We shared matzah and fruits. They brought glasses of sweetened tea for all of us. Dusk deepened into night, and I worried how we'd find our way out. I've always felt that the opening words of the Haggadah, pointing to Lachma Anya, the bread of poverty, the matzah, meant that the proper way to celebrate was to reach out to the deprived and not to stuff ourselves to engorgement. Bread leavened by yeast symbolizes things that have gone sour, and matzah symbolizes the return to simplicity, to basics, starting fresh. Of course, the cycle repeats itself over and over, but it's our awareness that makes the holiday the holy day. There is something we are not doing right. I was beyond grateful to have been there last Monday night. Now you have this Xerox, this weird-looking Xerox. On one side is Picasso's The Bull, eight lithographs that he published in the 40s to reduce the absolutely representational to the absolutely abstract and minimal. So you can see the big bull, and you can see in the second edition, you can see even further detail added. And then gradually the 3 dimensions become 2 dimensions. And the animal gets sliced up as if by a butcher until nothing remains but the 9 lines of the body, the head, the tail, and the reproductive organ. I'd like to think that in my poetry, some of which we'll read tonight together, that I'm moving from fullness to some basic principle towards the end. So he's a hard act to follow. But I thought it was a good idea to bring that image to you. Now, on the other side of this Xerox, you have a copy from the original typewritten letter, a typewritten poem, my first successful poem. You can see it was typed, and you can see that its dating is the December 3rd, 1964. We were in Richmond, Virginia then. We had come from our first sabbatical in Israel. We were here for 8 months in 61, 62. And this was my romance with Israel was expressed in this poem. A member of the congregation brought me to the workshop, led by Mrs. Ulrich Trubetskoy, a well-known writer for the New York Times and for the Richmond Dispatch, was married to Russian royalty. And you can see on the very top in her handwriting something about why not send this to a lyric contest. She was, as you can imagine, most encouraging to me. So I'll read the poem with you, with some of the changes that took place. We didn't know anything about celebrating Shabbat in Richmond, Virginia before we went to Israel. But the 8 months that we spent in Jerusalem, from October 61 to June of 62, gave us a richness that began to transform our lives in the diaspora. Sabbath in Jerusalem begins on Thursday. In perspiring buses, urging kilos of succulent tomatoes and piquant peppers through the windy mountain corridors to a bubbling primus, simmering rice, gusts of saffron, and crisp, soft loaves dipped in savory olive oil. Sabbath in Jerusalem arrives on Friday, on the last scheduled rays of a Mediterranean sun, as bouquets of roses cycle home past shutters, not long clanked down on 6 days' labor. Sabbath in Jerusalem is Saturday's bride, whose restoring love silences the nervous machinery of space, and with her lover sanctifies the brimming cup of time. You can feel the romance of that, and you can see where she made corrections at one point saying, "Can you find a more evocative word?" Rather than wholesome love, was restoring love. I'm hoping, by the way, that you're not going to sit there quiet and respectful, that you will engage me in dialogue with the readings of the poems. You'll ask me questions, question my thinking, but if you're quiet, I'll be dashed. So that was the beginning of our romance with Israel. We were so excited about the fact that our children were getting Hebrew. Even though we spoke Hebrew at home in the diaspora, in Jerusalem, it was a different kind of Hebrew. We brought an Israeli young man back with us to Richmond, Virginia, to keep the spirit of Jerusalem alive in the kind of impoverished atmosphere. And Emmanuel Ben Naya is here this afternoon. We have kept that relationship going since 1964. So I'll open my book, and you'll open the book with me, and we'll read a few poems. Page 9, Straw Bags, Homage to a Single Mother. Now these reflect experiences long ago, but they were written fairly recently. And the fairly recent is the result of my participation in a workshop led by Diane Greenberg. When Jack died in 2010, I spent a year floundering. The image that I can describe to you is an image that I saw in the New York Times on an article about Carol Joyce Oates, who'd lost her husband. And the artist there pictured her, a black figure, set aloft, flying, set against a page of the phone book. She was seeking an identity, a new identity. And that's how I felt that year. Well, towards the end of that year, Diane invited me to join the workshop, and shortly after this poem was written, well, a number of the poems were evoked by being in that environment. So let me read you about Straw Bags, Homage to a Single Mother, who was my mother and who was responsible for the brachot that Alice Shalvey spoke about. If anything came from her, it was the focus on brachot. I'm not a daily davener, but what I do enjoy is the presence of bracha. Each oblong piece of woven straw with its rounded top was about 30 centimeters wide by 60 long. Mother and I would cut the cotton linings and sew them onto the straw on our factory sewing machines, then fold and stitch up the sides like an open envelope. Sam sewed the snaps. Rose trimmed the threads. Voila, one complete straw pocketbook, produced by the Handcraft Studio, 74 Northeast 69th Street, Miami 38, Florida. Mother would pack up 2 or 3 dozen each week and bus them to the agent. They would harvest juicy little hamburgers and a sprinkling of canned peas for dinner, and an economy pocket of lamb stuffed with oatmeal dressing and roasted for Shabbos. I was 15. Sam was 11. Rose was 5. My father had left us early on after Rose was born, and my mother was the stalwart one who kept his family together, put bread on the table. Let's turn over to page 10. The letters make you wise. My mother started me with Yiddish and Hebrew. The beginning of my learning was with her. But in Miami, I wound up in a cheder where all of us, children of all ages, were in one room. And my beloved Melamed is who I'm writing about here. The letters make you wise. This summer, my Melamed died. I called him Mar Friedman, second only to my mother, impacting on my Jewishness, feeling, and identity. He had no children. I was his child. I had no father. He was my father. He was my first experience studying Torah. That gentle, sweet man would repeat in his Eastern European accent, oisi ois machkimois. Otiot machkimot. Oisi ois machkimois. The letters of the holy tongue make you wise. It was an old world shtibel, even though it was in a shul on Euclid Avenue and 14th Street. All of us, aged 8 to 13, were in a single cheder. Mar Friedman was protective of problematic texts. Rachav, of Joshua fame, ran a guest house. We visited him and Chaya in their tiny cottage, 1030 Washington Avenue, between encroaching hotels, and we saw him on the beach, graying curly hair, a smooth and hairless body. I wondered about their being childless. It was during the war, in the early 40s. We passed companies of soldiers drilling on Ocean Drive, breaking from calisthenics to race into the waves. My mother altered their uniforms. The Mar Friedmans are gone. The old world maskilim, masters of the letters that make you wise. You have experience like that? Anybody? You surely go back to the 40s. Not all of you are young and chickens. Yes.
Even in the later,
Yeah.
in the 50s, in England, we had Yeki, who were teaching in Jenkins.
You were what? I'm sorry? Louder.
Yeki.
You were Yekim.
They were no,
There were Yekim.
the teachers in the Havens
Mhm.
tended to be brought up like that.
My sister was in Camp Masad, and she remembers this ditty of, Ja, das ist a Ma'ader. Is this nicht a Ma'ader? This is about the first poetry workshop on page 11, the next page, when I went to Diane's house. I have to tell you that I was the only foreigner in that class. I still am. They're all Brits. And well, Australia was part of the Brits as far as I'm concerned. The accents were all English accents as opposed to my American. Anyway, it was a redeeming experience for me to be there. And I came out of my mourning as a result of that workshop, and my creativity began to return to me. My hand is steady here. My writing is clear and calm. Whatever agitation I came with has fled. Brits are all around me. Books, music, art, mottled light from the garden into a shaded living room. A flowery carpet covers Israeli tiles. A Western feeling, not Levantine. Suddenly, it is 50 years ago, and I am taking piano lessons in Richmond, Virginia. I leave my rabbinic household, the flurry of a congregational community, and enter the manicured estate of Christian missionaries to China. Florence would be arranging flowers. Her husband, Charlie, was upstairs, probably hungover. When we parted, Florence said to me, "Joe, I'm so glad I got to know you. You made me think better of the Jews." So my experience of leaving the congregational nest where I and my rabbi husband and the children and the several hundred families with their demands. My daughter is here, a congregational rabbi, is very familiar with that from her childhood and from her own adulthood. Going to her house was like a different world for me. It was great to leave my kitchen and my children, but I got a blast of anti-Semitism, unparalleled and unexpected in that home. Let's go. Okay, I think we're going to do a different experience in Israel now on page 15, the easy. So there were different experiences in Israel that affected our lives. The first one was that in 61, 62 with our young kids. And then we came in 69. We came for 2 months, and we stayed for 3 years. Jacob became the director of the University of California Education Abroad program in an unexpected thing, because the then director his wife had became ill, and he left the post. This was a new situation, the third year abroad in Jerusalem. And the administration of UC was interviewing UC people who were there. At this point, you see, Jacob had left the active rabbinate and was now in the field of scholarship. So we were there that summer, and we came with our 2 little suitcases for the summer, and we stayed for 3 years, which totally changed our life, because as a result of that stay, Jeremy went into the Army, and that's an experience that affects families totally. So we lived in this awful apartment on the Vegranot, and this is on page 15. This is about the Easy, my washing machine. Easy one. We lived in a 4-room closet. 3 teenage boys, 1 scholar who purposely enclosed himself in the so-called master bedroom, AKA study, and yours truly, a late application to feminist consciousness. My corner was the open eating area. To call it dining would be delusional, through which everyone had to pass to go anywhere. Any remotely intimate gesture would immediately invite public scrutiny. We were host to Zhukim. When I put on the light for a late night snack, the kitchen would move. I never entered without a sandal at the ready. We had an Easy, a semi-automatic washing machine whose mouth was suctioned onto a faucet in the wash basin and whose anus emptied into the bathtub. Well, I was ripe for a dream, and one night it happened. A dream so vivid and glorious, I have retained its pristine memory for these 40 years. I dreamed I found another room. Easy 2, Jerusalem, 1970. We lived in a 4-room closet. Pesach was approaching. How do we kosher the glassware? If in the bathtub, where do we bathe? Why, easy. Laundry can wait 3 days. Load the dishes into the cavity of the semi-automatic antiquity. Attach the nozzle to the sink faucet to fill it. Set the drain pipe in the bathtub to empty it. So I filled it, proud of my creative obedience to halakhic requirements. But the machine was not in neutral. The paddles gave one swift turn before I could pull the plug. The repairman didn't know the word halakha, and I didn't know the meaning of easy. Thank you. The next 2 pages are something of the romance of those early years. July in Jerusalem. 5 o'clock is my favorite hour. Late light rushes in from the balcony between olive branches, white, silver, gray. Even green, olive green, and fills me with repose. I sit on a low beach chair or sprawl on the paisley-covered foam pad reading about holiness, as if I have to read all about it to know it when it comes. I hope you've had moments like that, unexpected moments that are sacred. Milk, next page. Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he leaves the milk outside the door. Nearsighted, bookish, in a black beret, he rattles down the hill behind the house. Empty bottles bounce on his bicycle. Every week he counts out tickets for me, 10 lirot worth of pints. As usual, I put the milk away, start downstairs to shop. The Beit Lechem hills are clear, way down Hadassah Road. Dew still on the roses and the rusty banisters. He was standing there in the doorway, sweater sleeve pushed up, wrapped in talis and tefillin. My milkman was davening.
These incidents down at the time, or have you been reflecting on them more recently?
Mostly not at the time. They were written later. Sometimes a little bit later, sometimes a whole lot later. But at the time, I think I was not so much aware of my capacity to write this way. That developed over time. Page 31. In Israel, you will see the gradual loss of naivete. Small change. A beggar yelled at me in Jerusalem. So I give or I don't give. It depends not on the status of the national budget or on any avowed morality, but on whether the small change is handy, whether my skirt has a pocket so I don't have to dismantle my day pack and break the rhythm of my daily errands. Thursday on Ben Yehuda, a beggar held out his hand. Dab it. No pocket. No handy change. I cringed and passed him. Our eyes met and he hollered, Yisrael, Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. I am diminished every day I pass the homeless, also in Berkeley and in New York. How do I pay for the gift of Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim? Jews, compassionate ones, children of compassionate ones. The next page, 32, is a commentary on the Isaac and Ishmael narrative, the story of the two sons of Abraham who have very different treatment, and how that evolves into how that theology evolves into our own lives here. I call it peace processed. Man sets out to kill his son, throws him out with his mom into a desert without water, but God arrives in time. That was the son the man didn't love so much. So God punished him by making him kill the son he really loved. Great parenting. After these attempted murders, the boys, who hadn't talked to each other since childhood, didn't talk to each other about these scenarios either. Or to him either. They just let the old man be. But hear this. When the old man died, those boys, themselves now old men, came together to bury him. Only when the old man died could the sons make peace. Does that mean that Israel and Palestine will finally come together when they bury the old man, the source of their hate? Who is he? This is not my parsha notes, right in the text. Isaac and Ishmael don't speak to each other after the Akedah. Only when Abraham dies do they come together and bury him. So there are subtle things going on in the text that we don't always hear in the local Dvar Torah in the Parshat HaShavua. Comments, questions? Yes. Yes.
In the comparison between the writing of your poetry to the creating of your three-dimensional midrashic art, what would you say is the relationship and the interaction between?
Is there a relationship between the word and the image?
Calling your three-dimensional collages images?
Okay, that's a very good question. When I collect the junk, I usually don't know what I'm going to do with it. It's only after I do it, whatever it is I'm going to do, that the concept gels and I can give it a name. The one time when this didn't happen was when I found a little suitcase, and in it was broken hinges and a half a scissors. A half a scissors is like a knife. And I saw right away that this was an Akedah, a story of a house coming apart and pain. And so what came out of that was an Akedah in which the broken scissors became the knife in Sarah's cleavage. There's not always a relationship between the word and the... the only thing that I can tell you is that the words usually come after the creation. They seem to be separate things. Let's look at page 36. We're very fortunate. We live in this great house across the street from the Larome Hotel. And at the time that we acquired it, I found myself struggling between get more, and give it up, let it go. The tension between acquiring things and letting things go. I remember my first night here on a foam mattress in a castle of antique floor tiles, broken plaster, naked bulbs, and greasy cobwebs dangling 12 feet high, deep in stone. No matter how I swept and sponged, my bare feet, though relishing the coolness, blackened in seconds with millennial schmutz. But I was light and empty, innocent of things and free. When I hungered, I would cross the street to the hotel lobby, settle into real upholstery, and look at fashionable women. All that was then. Late last night, I cursed the blessing of things, ruthlessly clearing shelves, straining at suitcase zippers, panicked at the hour and the clutter. But mostly I was bewildered by my craziness, letting go and holding on. And in the morning, once again, in the gentle light and shade out front, I noticed how I opened my iron gate and sat on my stone wall and my hands smelt the lavender bush. Finally, I saw myself, the pattern of my roots, in Cain, of all noble precedent, whose name means getting things, and iron, and Abel, vanity, a short-lived breath. They made the bargain all too clear that I and all the rest am in their image, getting more and holding on, but briefly, vainly as a breath. So I understood Cain and Abel in a different way. They're the archetype of humanity. Cain is the one who gets, he's strong, acquires things. And Abel, Havel, is just a breath. He doesn't last. But that's both sides of us. We grasp, and we can't hold on to it. So I saw myself in that house, in the cobwebs and in the schmutz, in that image. Now, I see that it's 6 o'clock, and I don't know how long that I'm going to last or you're going to last, how much more I should read. But, well, let's take one with a little humor. How about page 113? Should we say seeing is believing or believing is seeing? This poem says, well, first of all, I should tell you about the cartoon I have on the refrigerator. Many New Yorker cartoons for those of you who have been at the house. These people are coming out of church and shaking the minister's hands. And the guy says to the minister, you either have to believe it to see it. Do I have to believe it to see it? Believing is seeing, says the poem, so as not to stray after his heart and after his eyes. The pious Chosid, upon entering the bus, takes off his glasses so as not to see the women. A voice from heaven speaks to him. If you keep your glasses on, you'll see the difference between a woman and a telephone pole. If you take them off, they will all be women. Who is Rabbi Barry Leff? He's local. I don't know him, but I attribute this bit of wisdom to him. Turn to page 99 on Age Before Beauty. Some time ago, my neighbor, who had done it twice, urged me, Joe, you are beautiful. You really, really should have a facelift. Seduced by flattery, I plunked down my 500 shekels and met with her surgeon. He pointed out in the mirror how he would plump up my upper lip. He would iron out my wrinkled cheeks. He was very clear about the cost and the pain. I left his office, fingering my fast disappearing stiff upper lip and my prune-textured cheeks and my distinguished nose, which in the sunlight becomes a light unto the nations. But it only fixes the outside. Mirror, mirror on the wall, go to hell. But you know, I have big trouble with the titles. I can't find the poem. Or I have the poem, I don't remember how I entitled it. So I think I want to leave you with a couple more, or just a few more. Look at page 92. This is about my telephone book. And maybe you have a telephone book like this too that goes back 50 years. Frayed pages. my phone book is a mess. Frayed, faded pages floating away from the ring binding. Toss it! No! It's so old, the number columns squeezes room for 6 digits, really built for 5. As for 10, well, copy the names into a new book, then toss it. No! There are friends there who have died. Some are penciled in Jack's tight hand, surfacing unexpected. Toss it. No, toss it. So easily. Much younger, I tossed the Richmond book, together with its still earlier fragments, with some yellowed recipes. Still young, I tossed the Berkeley book. I can't make that mistake in Jerusalem.
Did you really do that?
Did I really what?
Did you really throw it?
No, I couldn't toss. Oh, I did toss. And now I've lived to regret it.
Come to my house.
You have ones that you haven't tossed? Uh, 88. I'm getting to the section about Jacob, and that's okay to leave you with some of those directions, fragments. Going through old papers, I found a scrap I'd saved. Do you save papers? Do you save things and you find yourself being buried in paper? Directions. How to catch a snowflake. How wondrous, simple, and intriguing. I yearned for the return of winter. Not long afterwards, and for no reasonable reason, I found myself once again in the emergency room with Jack. They rushed me out of the room so they could do what they tried to do, and shortly called me back. I held his shoulders, still warm, and wiped the damp from his pale forehead, and marveled at his open mouth, as if his last breath was about to catch a melting snowflake. Now, below the picture, Adam Gopnik, the New Yorker of January 3rd, 2011, on the snowflake, writes, "The final truth about snowflakes is that they become more individual as they fall. Buffeted by wind and time, they are translated as if by magic into ever more strange and complex patterns, until at last, like us, they touch earth. Then, like us, they melt." Wilson Bentley, age 19, in 1885, photographed his first snowflake. One more. Jack's ties on page 84. Now, you know that bow ties in Hebrew are called parparim. Is that right? Okay. Well, parpar in early Jewish art and in classical art is the Greek word. The Greek word is psyche, P-S-Y-C-H-E. Psyche is portrayed in early Jewish art as a butterfly. Obviously, because the butterfly moves from material to spiritual. Along with 90 cartons of books, Jack brought all his ties on Aliyah, swearing he would never wear them in this casual and relaxed promised land. So they hung or lay in quiescent dignity in his walk-in closet, gathering the holy dust of the Holy Land. During the course of years, I sewed a few of them ornamentally on cushions. I added a panel of ties to enlarge a shirt I loved. Some advanced to Purim costumes, a kind of tribute to his material life. Then Jack died. The sport coats and slacks were handed up to other men. But the ties had not come out of the closet. They were mute, dormant in a cocoon. A cocoon is a womb waiting to give birth. The bow ties, in Hebrew parparim, butterflies, started to climb out of the yortzeit glass, climbing onto coils of copper wire ascending to the heavens. The lonely worm, born into fluttering color, is the butterfly soul of the psyche of the ancients. Jack is free at last. The bow ties are out of the closet, ascending. Thank you.
I don't know whether we should leave it with that. I think that is the most remarkable ending to an extraordinary reading. But I feel that might be against the rules. Do you want to take some questions? Do you want to take comments? Or will you leave us with that elegiac ending?
If you'd like to talk, I'd love to hear. See, I told her not to be polite and well-behaved. Yeah. Hill?
Just speak up.
I felt getting whumped by the messages you were giving to us when you talked about going to the Jahalim and what we should be aware of. And then the part of me that I think cried together with you was when you talked about your milkman. That was so powerful. There he was in the alleyway, and we all start wondering, what's he doing? What's he going to do? And there he is davening. And I'm going to take them both with me, both messages. That was from your romance with Israel. It's still powerful today. Thank you.
Thank you. The romance was lovely when it lasted, but things got sour. I have to admit that. I'm still here. Right, I'm still here, living in the dilemma of things that got sour and could be refreshed. Yeah.
Looking at the exhibition on Jesus and art, and of course, in this poem of yours, the powerful image, verbal image, is of the tefillin. And in Chagall's picture, there is the image of the Christ on the cross with the tefillin on. So there are parallels, and they both evoke very powerful feelings.
Parallels and irony, yes, certainly. I was there at that museum, at that exhibit the other day, and so aware of particularly the relationship of the Akedah to the crucifixion. All right. Yes, Toby.
I do not forget, don't forget when you came to our synagogue and you showed us a picture of Jacob and Esau, and all we saw were the backs, not me, the backs of Jacob and Esau. Do you want to tell us more about that?
The poem is here, if I could find it quickly. That's the problem with not finding them. Okay, page 47, found it. Okay. On the total portion of Vayishlach, Jacob and Esau are embracing in a woodcut by Jacob Steinhardt. Look carefully. You can't tell who was Jacob, who was Esau. How great is that? Who cares? It was a real hug in 1950. Is an encore possible in our lifetime? How about one more on Havdalah? This really should be the last. I did 2 poems on Havdalah on page 63 and 64. 63. Wine blessed and sipped, sweet spices inhaled. But what curious act is this, fingernails against the candlelight, with praises to him who creates the fiery lights? Does God also sanctify the other 6 days? The work my hands begin once more that ceased the day before, when rest was sanctified but not restlessness, that hovers over Sabbath peace and insolent dare. Blessed all you like, blessed breathless. See if you can keep the agitated shimmer of your fingernails quiet. Place your labors on a platter to warm without cooking, your mind to simmer softly on the holy writ, till time darkness for the wine and spices, and the lightning of the restless fiery wicks. Turn the page over, and you'll see something entirely different. I don't have the original, but this picture, this etching or drawing by the Basque artist Chillida, Eduardo Chillida. I have the print of that, and I'm looking at it and saying, does Chillida know what that gesture is about? The gesture looks like the gesture we make when we do Havdalah over the last bracha. I have no idea what his background is. Basque, was he Murano? But this is what he wrote. He often drew his own hands. He wrote, "The hand springs out of the body. The hand is where the human body and space meet. Slightly opening the hand unfastens a piece of space around it. And when the fingers close again, slowly, the being of this piece of space changes, hidden within the fist. Space is the nucleus. It gives life and volume from the inside." I set the framed print of Chillida's cupped hands next to my Havdalah things. Maybe this Basque artist is descended from Muranos. He might not even know why or when to cup his hand. This very specific, mysterious gesture. I never really understood the gesture. Cupping your hand so your fingernails reflect the light of those 2 flames. Is it the flame? Is it the reflection? Lamely, I thought the flickering fingers are agitating for the workaday week. Maybe Chillida's cupped hand protects Shabbat space. Now it will open to free it like a bird, till those 2 little flames once again free the cup of Shabbat space. So I have no idea about the context, no idea about the man and his life, but the gesture spoke to me. So you can apply it. Anything that you see can invite your own parshanut. Thank you again. Yeah. Thank you.
Even though you gave us the magic in the beginning and your romantic feeling and everything, and you felt that things have gotten sour, but I must admit that you have not become bitter, and that you have been teaching at Schechter. You've given Israeli women such a beautiful feeling about sources and sacredness and creativity, and they come to you workshop every year, and they come away so inspired, and you change their life. They always say that in the exhibit at the end, that you change their life. So it's true that we mature and things look a little different, but the beauty is that you haven't become bitter. You have continued to create, and you continue to inspire, and you continue to really give us all hope. So thank you.
Thank you, Shula. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank all of you for coming. I think we leave this gathering greatly enriched in every way, spiritually, intellectually. Thank you.
Great.
Great.